Okay, this might sound harsh, but I've decided that I'm no longer going to support mental health initiatives. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't, because I know that when people do these things, it comes from a very good and kind and caring place. And I also know that there are plenty of people out there who've been helped by these kind of things. But when it comes to the industrial scale mental health crisis that is going on in our culture, we have to acknowledge that there are two sides to it. Not wholly separate sides, but two slightly overlapping, but very, very different in terms of their basis sides. Firstly, there are people in our society who have a practical problem with their brain, where the chemicals there are wrong, where the structure isn't doing what it should do, and it causes them problems, and they need to be supported, they need to be offered medication, potentially all sorts of other treatments and support that might help them to get their lives in order and overcome those issues. Then there are the vast majority of people I know who are suffering with their mental health. And they're suffering with their mental health because of external factors. And ultimately, they boil down to some combination of the following issues and others. The government pushing ahead with that austerity programme that killed thousands and thousands of people. The government pushing ahead with a hard Brexit that wasn't what anybody really wanted and wasn't what anybody actually believed they'd voted for, and took away a lot of our freedoms and affected our income and affected prices and the cost of living. The fact that the government ignored the science and allowed a pandemic to sweep through this country completely unnecessarily, killing thousands and thousands of people that we loved and cared about, and leaving thousands and thousands of more with serious long-term medical health problems, and also thousands and thousands more still afraid to leave their homes because they're clinically vulnerable and it's not safe for them to go out while that pandemic still continues to rage, and the government still fails to fund proper testing facilities for those who need it, fails to fund support for those who want to stay home and keep themselves safe, fails to fund all the initiatives that could have, the track and trace that could have worked at one point and wasn't done properly and didn't. And then the government has failed to do anything about the cost of living crisis, has failed to raise public sector wages so that people actually have enough to live on. And let's not forget that many people were already leading difficult, tough lives well before that because of rising inequality in our society and the way that a tiny percentage of people these days have access to the vast majority of resources, and the rest of us are expected to struggle and struggle and struggle. And it's no surprise in those circumstances that people find that their mental health deteriorates, because of course it does. And on top of that, we've had the fact that due to the mishandling of the pandemic, people were stuck indoors and unable to see people and unable to socialise and unable to travel and do all the things that make them feel good about themselves. And we've now got a war going on the other side of Europe, which of course we're all stressed and worried about, a war which could have been avoided if Boris Johnson and co had stepped up and done their job in terms of diplomacy and in terms of being honest and clear about what was going on. It's Putin's fault that he's invaded, but to call it an unprovoked attack is just absolute gibberish. It suggests that the media and the government are not addressing what is really going on there. There's a lot of things that have provoked it. Doesn't make it right, but it's very much a provoked attack. And it's affecting ordinary people in Ukraine whose lives were already troubled in many of the same ways that our lives here are troubled. And what all of us affected by that need might in the short term be, those things that the mental health initiatives recommend, like a cup of tea with a friend, or having a chat to somebody, calling a helpline, reading something positive, going for a walk, all of that stuff in the short term. But what we need in the long term is a revolution that gets rid of these incompetent leaders that have put our needs last and prioritised the needs of their own wealthy funders and backers and their cronies and, frankly, themselves. And it is absolutely gaslighting us in the extreme to say that the problems we are going through are somehow in our heads. What we are suffering is not overwhelmingly a mental health problem. What we are suffering is a breakdown of the very fibre of our society and literally people's ability to live and to be rewarded for their hard work and to have lives which are absolutely available there if we structured our society in a better way. So I want people to not be fooled into thinking that the solution in the long term is about mental health initiatives. The solution in the long term is to take back power over our lives, because ultimately this is a democracy and we can make these choices and we can change things and we can have things better. It requires a lot of work, I'm not denying that, and a lot of work that is difficult to do while we're all struggling so much and many of us are mentally suffering so much. But it is the only long-term solution, and so for me, I'm going to put my resources into fighting for that, because ultimately that is the solution to the mental health crisis in this country and around the world. And I hope you'll come with me. See you next week. Maybe I'll be funny. Probably not.